The following is a Sports Ethos presentation. Yo, welcome to another episode of Roundball Ramble. I'm your host, Corbin Ford. You can follow me on Twitter at CorbinNBA. This is a Sports Ethos presentation like the intro says, so check out Sports Ethos on Twitter at Sports Ethos Online, sportsethos.com. Today I was really fortunate to be joined by RK of Beyond the RK. You can find him on Twitter at Beyond the RK. Orlando Magic expert, NBA roster construction extraordinaire, all-around great guy, and I was privileged to have him on the show to talk all things Orlando Magic. We discussed the top three picks and how they would fit alongside the Magic heading into the draft. We also looked at who they ended up selecting, Paulo Banchero, and did an in-depth deep dive into his game. And then we looked at the rest of the roster, evaluated the guards, looking at the big men, the front office, the coaching staff, all of that. And then, we took a step out and decided to check out what we liked and what we didn't like as a whole from the NBA draft. So, all in all, a really fun conversation with a really great guy. Again, check him out on Twitter at Beyond the RK. Also, make sure to check out his Substack and his YouTube. Great content. He's pretty much everywhere. So, definitely make sure to look into that. All right, y'all, as you can see, we've slowed down just a little bit here on Roundball Ramble because we're in the off season now, Summer League's right around the corner. I will be there for all 2 weeks or a week and a half, whatever the case may be. So, not a whole lot to go, but we're still going to have free agency. We're still going to have some content going into off season, just not every day because, it's nothing happening every day. But thank y'all for rocking with me as always. Do appreciate y'all and the listening that y'all give me. It helps. Any feedback, it also helps. Y'all are my friends, and I really do not take that lightly. So definitely make sure, again, check me out on Twitter at CorbinNBA. And you know what? For myself, I'm Frosty. Y'all stay frosty and enjoy this great conversation I had with RK from Beyond the RK. All right, y'all. I am pleased to have on a very, very special guest, Orlando Magic expert, great guy in terms of content you should follow if you're looking for team building, scouting, team construction, which is kind of my jam. We have RK on from Beyond the RK. You can follow him on Twitter at Beyond the RK. Bro, how you doing, man? Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate you spending the time here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Corbin. Big fan of your work. Big Phoenix Mercury Suns fan over there, making it happen. But thanks for having me. I just love the draft and talking about the Magic, where we're heading as a team. It's all fun stuff, looking up.
Definitely. I'm excited to have you on, especially someone who writes about the Magic. I know you did an article just recently about who just joined the Magic? Number one overall pick, Paulo Banchero. I love the kind of meme put on Twitter with the basically Mount Rushmore.
Yeah,
I like that. I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah.
The Magic Mount Rushmore. It's pretty much, at least the player-wise anyway. You got Shaq, Dwight, Penny, T-Mac. The big four. No one's coming close in the moment. But that's a little bit of hope for Magic fans is this number one pick next in the line of some great number one picks before. Great draft history in this franchise. So there's already, lofty expectations of, hey, we had Shaq and Dwight roll in the door last time we had a number one pick. Can you be anything like that? So, hard to live up to that, but, some players exceed expectations, so we can't wait.
Oh, absolutely. I call that group the NBA Jam Collection because you bring those out depending on what year you play. Between Penny and Shaq and them, man, you got yourself a core. Yeah. But yeah, man, I'm really excited to talk about Orlando. I know that I've only been following more recently the last 2 years, more, I want to say in depth, only because I've been excited to follow a team that is just starting the rebuild process. Orlando, we knew, trade deadline 2019 really went into that. Offloading Aaron Gordon, trading Nikola Vucevic, bringing back some younger pieces and really trying to start with that. Drafting, of course, Jalen Suggs, and then, of course, also Franz Wagner with the 5th and 7th pick. And I was excited. I really thought that my ideal draft thought at the time was Jalen Suggs and Moses Moody. I thought that the scoring upside was better there. But Franz Wagner went and blew all my expectations out the water with one of the best rookie seasons in a minute. Not just in Orlando, but one of the best. I mean, we had a strong rookie class last year, and Wagner's right up there with the great. So I guess I want to start with your thoughts on, well, let's kind of even walk it back a little bit. I kind of want to start with your history, kind of being an Atlanta Magic fan, being kind of like the content creator space that you kind of have now in the NBA community with the Magic, with this team building, and then we'll kind of look toward the beginning of this Magic rebuild and your initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sum up kind of my background. I'm just a lifelong Magic fan, a huge fan of Shaq right out of the gates. I was born in '92, and the Magic
Okay.
drafted him. That was the same draft as Shaq, so it was just
Match
perfect
made in
timing.
heaven. Yeah.
Right when I'm bored, Magic fan for life. And then T Mac really sold me just on the love for the game, going to Magic games with my dad and brother, season tickets during those times. It's the reason I love basketball and just got into it there. And I've just been a diehard NBA fan ever since, sitting and watching. I love Dwayne Wade and Carmelo back then in the '09 era of just growing up watching these guys play. And that '03 draft class kind of grew up with that class, it feels like. And then of course we got the Dwight Howard teams, and that was a real blessing to get to watch like a full offense, full team first type of a contender really make a run for it. So I love basketball for all those reasons, and just would love to keep pursuing all of it, from just talking about team building, scouting, like you talked about, and basketball strategy. So that's kind of what led me to this, and not seeing a ton of great coverage, especially from the national perspective, kind of made me want to go into a little more talking about the Magic more clearly and thoroughly than maybe I saw others do it. So that's really all there was to it. And I'm just a really big fan of just the basketball at large and everything that goes into it. So I love talking about it, breaking it down as a fan, and then of course professionally, I would love to pursue that type of work as well in terms of scouting and all that stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I will say this at the end as well. But please make sure to check out the Beyond the Arcade Substack. Not just the stuff that he's done recently, but it's a really good deep dive. Like you said, team construction, philosophy kind of conversation that you see bits and pieces and pockets there, but not as much as there could and should be, and especially not as much on a team like the Magic. I think it's a perfect case study, right now for a team undergoing a rebuild and trying to like see that process unfold in real time. And I guess that's what brings me to my second question here. I jumped the gun totally off the jump here, but looking at the way that the Magic started, their rebuild, in terms of letting off some of the old guard, they had a couple first round appearances under Steve Clifford, who just got rehired again by the Hornets. Is hilarious, but between Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, of course, and the big one, Nikola Vucevic, the All-Star there, in letting those players go with the pieces they got back, which, go from Wendell Carter Jr., to RJ Hampton, just in terms of the types of players. Kind of how have you felt with this initial start? I mean, even before we get to this recent draft.
Right. I think this front office has shown that they have a process, and that they really wanted at first to feel out what they had in the roster when they arrived. To quickly summarize, when Hennigan left, the timetable was the other front office actually traded Terrence Ross and a first to Orlando for Serge Ibaka, and that was Jeff Weltman in Toronto's front office making that deal, and that was pretty much the last deal Rob Hennigan made in Orlando. And then that summer, they hired Weltman and Hammond to run the front office, and they drafted Jonathan Isaac with the sixth pick, and that really started the next rebuild stage from there. Except, like we said, they kind of didn't go straight to the bottom. They decided to figure out who was valuable on the roster, were there good basketball players there, and there were. Like you mentioned with Clifford, they were able to mold a playoff team around Vucevic's offense and the defensive just athleticism and versatility of Aaron Gordon and Isaac next to him really took that to a next step. But I know I was a Magic fan who was kind of tired of running on the treadmill of mediocrity, if that's the phrase, where you didn't really see the ceiling with that team, where that seemed to be capped out to a certain degree of, Vucevic can't have any more usage. We are using every bit of Vucevic's offensive skill to create a half-court offense. He was our most reliable half-court creator in that sense. So we made the best of the situation. But to me, they made the right move, even if it was a little later than I would have liked. But it makes sense because they are seeing what they have, so they have to give them a chance, and that's longer than fans would like. So they decided all at once, about 2.5 years in, they made two playoffs in a row, but then some injuries hit. The All Stars weren't quite as good. The shooting wasn't there, and suddenly we were just awful. We didn't have a choice to tank or not. Like the Magic were just bad after the Fultz and Isaac injury. They just weren't good enough to even contend for a play-in game. So that was the year, I believe it was their third year here, where they decided to hit the reset button, the big red button, and send all the veterans around the country, which happened to be all to pretty good teams. The Celtics, the Nuggets, the Bulls, they pretty much set up their veterans for good situations, which I have to imagine is only positive for the relationships with the players and agents and all that. But it was nice to finally see them make that move, and I've really been on board with just about every move they've made since then. I mean, they're trying to establish a team around two-way, team first versatility, where players can play with any type of a guy and have success, and they want a full roster of that. I have a quote here about that actually from Jeff Weltman on the Russillo podcast just a few days ago. He talked to him the day after making the pick, and talking about Paulo specifically as well, the positional versatility at both ends of the floor, the IQ, the size, that's the way we see our team growing. That's why we think Paulo is one of those guys that can fit in anywhere with anyone, and we want a bunch of those guys, and I think we're developing that profile. And
Wow.
that's just one more example of Paulo fitting the profile with his versatility on both ends, and he could end up. I'm going to try not to overuse the word versatility because it is a key theme of today's podcast, but he could be as versatile as anyone on either end, especially if he fine tunes that defense. And talking about the defense, some people have concerns over his shooting and defense, but I think those are a little overblown, and we can get into that a little later. But
Yeah.
I think he'll be capable in just about every role, and the big key of versatility is that you don't have too many holes that other teams can pick on when you're on the floor, that they won't take advantage of a slow step, slow footed big man on defense or someone that can't shoot on offense. So I really like where they're headed with the roster building, and on board with just about all these picks. I mean, we're talking about 10 guys under 25 years old that kind of built this roster around, who, generally speaking, are all long, strong, and skilled for their position. And if they're not that great defenders, they probably make up for it on the offensive end. So it's a nice balance to see so many good basketball players in one place, and hopefully just growing into a sum of the parts that could be even more impressive down the road.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really like the context which you kind of went into the beginning of this, with back with Serge Ibaka. Shout out to Rob Hennigan.
That's how you start a run-on sentence. That's one run-on sentence.
Oh no,
from Serge Ibaka to Paulo Banchero.
But it's a nice cut, like the way that you did. What, 5 minutes, like a succinct like timeline? No, of course.
I blacked out. I tried to sum it up for us. Yeah.
No, it's great because you do see not only two different organizational like structures and goals. One that more or less did seem to kind of tread mediocrity. They were the ones that the 15 million to Jeff Green that one year. That was like, why? Like from that year to like now it's okay. You know what? We're fully going to embrace the rebuilding process and make moves toward that effect. We can react. Injuries obviously kind of forced the Magic's hand, but it's like, okay, we can adapt with that. We're not just going to go and bring in, make a trade for a guy on an expiring deal, past his prime, which I could see, another team possibly doing or having a situation like that happen. And so now it brought us up here to Banchero, and before we even really get into Paulo, like you said, the shooting and other things we could talk about, I kind of want to get back to, and I know a little bit of this, but your thoughts between, what was and still is basically been a 3-player draft. So you did have, of course, Jabari Smith Jr. from Auburn, Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga, and then, of course, Paulo. And who you wanted to kind of be selected number one? Because I will tell you right now, I was on the Jabari Smith train, tooting the horn, dancing up and down. Like, to have a guy at 6'10" with that shooting ability that he does, I really saw him possibly growing out, maybe not getting quite the handle that, Paulo Banchero has, but at least enough to kind of get into his shot. I just was like, wow, he could be a great release valve for your Cole Anthonys, for your Jalen Suggs, your Franz Wagner, someone who can just create space off pick and pop action. I was really big on that. And then after that was probably Banchero. Third for me was Chet, even though I figured Chet would probably be either number one or number two for the Magic's front office just because of his his length. And that's the buzzword with the Orlando Magic front office. Length, John Hammond, Wellman. Like those are the kind of things you throw out there. And him being a defensive game changer on that end, I could see Magic fans and the front office being enamored with that. So I guess I throw it over to you. Obviously now we know who is drafted, but what were your thoughts kind of leading up to that? Were you a bigger fan of Jabari? Did you have knocks on him? Were you thinking Holmgren would be the one? Were you always on Banchero's train? What is your kind of, I guess, thought process leading up to draft night?
Yeah, I'll try to word it the right way because it's all down to little verbiage. But
Oh,
I think the Magic wanted, or my opinion was, I thought the Magic wanted Chet, and I also projected Chet to be the best player or fit for this team on my Magic centric team centric big board.
okay.
So there's probably 50 signs, a bunch of them that you mentioned between the length and the skill and really just the history of the draft that Weltman and Hammond have made these types of picks and bet on certain attributes before, and that led me to think it was Chet. And to touch on Jabari, just as a fan of basketball, I love watching him. Like he's just exciting. He would like as a Magic fan who just wants to watch a fun product, I probably would have loved that pick because he is just a wet shooter from deep, and the defensive versatility that if he has any Richard in his game with that stroke, everyone likes that.
Yes.
And then, I'm always a fan of betting on long defenders, versatility, shot blockers, and 3-point shooting. Like, I'm a fan of all those skills. But that all being said, from a scout big board draft perspective, I did have Paolo and Chet just a smidge higher on the big board there.
Okay.
And it was kind of for the reasons you mentioned, for the handles and the playmaking were a big differentiator for Paolo, where he's really, it's one of those situations where his like synergy profile will be like 1.0 on every category, where every role he's put in, he's an efficient scorer, and he might not be the best ISO player, but he's not the worst. He's probably average or above average, and same
Mm,
for every single role down the line. Where when you have that all around efficiency, there's definitely a sum of the parts goal there, where all those skills come together into one more impactful overall two-way player. And on top of all that, it seemed like Paolo had so few holes, and a bunch of the nerdier draft geeks that go even harder on this will tell you that he had the star scoring potential, that he had the shot creator potential to be a star in this draft based on at 6'10 with a 7'1 wingspan, I believe, being able to handle, create his own shot, and have the vision to look for others. It's just a really rare set of skills to just come out of the gates with, where you're able to develop pretty much everything realistically, and you don't necessarily have to come up with a specific goal of he's going to be our 3 and D wing for 10 years. Like he could be anything, and especially with him and Franz next to each other, which is probably the most exciting pairing on this roster going forward, where you have arguably the two best offensive options on the team, both being 6'10 forwards who can play both ends and dribble, pass, and shoot. And that's just a really base package to build around as a team, especially in offense. But I would say more than anything that I just like the versatility of the roster, where we're able to play anyone with anyone, ideally, where you can throw Paolo out there with the bench, and he might be flanked by more shooting than with the starters, where he can really get into that drive and kick game, where the bench has Cole Anthony, RJ Hampton, Chumo Kiki, and Mo Bamba, while the starters has a little more of the sturdy rock boulder shoulder defenders with Fultz and Suggs and Wendell and Isaac when he's healthy. And it's just a really fun fit going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think you brought up a really good point in terms of how he will work with Franz. Having two guys with that size, the ability to, play make in space, the pick and rolls, like you said, are going to be great. And also, Franz was surprising. I wasn't high, and I think it's going to be a great parallel we'll go into this next right now. There was questions for me with Franz about his shooting and how that would translate at the next level. Like, yeah, he could shoot the three, but it wasn't like, a really good part of his game. If anything, when you saw weaknesses on there, shooting consistently would come up there. I think we say the same with Paulo, at least from three. From mid range, one of the better shooters in college. Obviously, his ability to just work in his bag and get to that spot is great. It's almost like a video game, kind of seeing how he's able to just do it. It's really cool. But his 3 point shot has been much maligned in terms of consistency from the outside and some of the issues there, or maybe whether those issues are overblown. And that's why I throw over to you. And I guess we can start with the shooting and then even go to the defense. But those are the two things that have been talked about against Paulo being the clear cut number one is, we don't know, the motor on the defensive end and the shooting from outside. What says you to that? I know that, again, you wrote a pretty detailed article on Paulo, but what are your thoughts on those perceived weaknesses and whether they are as big as you think, or whether you think they're as big as you hear, or hey, we're kind of piling on a little too much?
Yeah, I do think the weaknesses are a tad overblown, probably because we're in the top three pick discussion, so everyone's nitpicking the differences between the prospects, and Chet looks like an elite rim protector, and Jabari seems like he'll be a versatile wing front court defender. So the idea that comparing him to those two maybe hurt the perception of his defense, at least in my eyes. And, he can maybe lollygag or maybe not give his full competitive effort in general. But from the defensive perspective, his size is one thing already, where it's 6'10", 250 pounds with either 7'1" or 7'2" wingspan. I'm blanking, but just a huge guy with length, and he's going to be stuck in between Isaac or Franz and Wendell, three other just strong defenders. So in terms of defense, there is a concern, but part of me thinks between Jamal Mosley's competitive energy that he'll kind of inspire that type of it's that more so that the defensive energy will be contagious on that roster, where just he won't be able to play without competing and giving his all every possession, because there's just a no plays off mentality that's already been built that other coaches will talk about after the game, like, oh, we were up 20 and these guys just wouldn't let off. And that's just always what you hear about this team. So in terms of the defense, that probably is the biggest concern, but I wouldn't call it like a real issue where I don't expect opposing offenses to be singling him out at the next level. But we'll see. I mean, that is definitely a to be determined, and it's harder to project than the other ones. But I'd say it's the biggest concern, only because relative to the other top three picks, it's not as glaring of a big strength as for them. But I really think within our system, he'll be forced to make rotations and try his hardest. And with that size, surrounded by other smart elite defenders, that it should work out with the development. And obviously, it takes a buy-in and a work ethic from Paolo's spot that we kind of take for granted when we talk about this. But that's the defensive side of things.
I feel that.
And to talk about jump back on the Franz Moody thing, it kind of, thinking about it here in live time, I agreed with you back then, and there might be some similarities here to Paolo and Jabari as well, because I wanted Moses Moody at that pick as well, for similar reasons. He was a long wing defender who can shoot threes and had that mid-range off the dribble potential, where maybe he's going to be a tough shot maker right there. And that's when I'm thinking about it now, and they take Franz over that because of all the ancillary skills, where Franz can play with anyone, where he's got the dribble pass shoot combo and the plus defensive length, where he can play in any lineup with just about anyone and be a good basketball player. And I think that combination of skills, something PD Webb just wrote about as well, with the dribble pass shoot wings, where that has become more valuable than the 3-and-D wing as role player ideas in the NBA. And that doesn't mean 3-and-D wings have no value. I think they're very rare and very positive impact for championship teams. But the idea that there's a 3-and-D wing who can also dribble, pass, and shoot, that's just next level of, this guy really can't hurt us as long as he's on the floor and moving the ball, making team first decisions, and competing defensively. So that kind of reminds me of the Jabari Paolo discussion as well, where there's a 3-and-D, a little bit taller players involved, but 3-and-D Jabari with that ISO tough shot making potential, but they go with the better basketball player, at least in the all around skills perspective of right now, where he can do everything and has room to develop realistic in every single path and different roles, different skills. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of their draft process. That where maybe that's the difference between at least my evaluation of who they should take, or difference of opinion, or team building mentality. But that seems to at least be where they're at. And then we can talk about his shooting in a minute as well. I
Oh
think
yeah.
he's a little underrated as a shooter.
No, yeah, we definitely want to get into shooting because there's a few other guys with that same question. I like that you did bring out the valuableness of these kind of multifaceted wings. That yeah, maybe the three and B it's there, but it's so much more in terms of being connecting pieces and being able to contribute in a
Yeah.
variety of ways. That's really really good, and yeah, something that obviously Wagner brings more in spades than Moody. Still early, 1 year, like the book's not written on them, of course, but we did see immediately Wagner be able to be someone who could take on additional facilitating and allow Cole Anthony to just focus on what Cole Anthony wants to do, which is score the basketball, and kind
Yes,
of
sir.
bridge the gap before we saw Markel Fultz come in late in the season from that playmaking perspective, especially while Jalen Suggs really trying to find his way after a really rough rookie season overall, but like a really rough first half specifically. But yeah, I guess going into the shooting, because I guess that's question marks for. There's been question marks for Vaughns. I think he's more or less kind of pushed some of that back with the really strong performance this past year, repeatable form. Just basically making it look a little overstated, or a little, yeah, basically the fears being a little overstated there. Paulo, I guess, from deep has been a question, and then you look at Jalen Suggs, who had a really rough shooting here, which I was not
Mhm.
expecting at all. Considering what we
Yeah.
saw in college. Even to a lesser extent, Markel Fultz, who mid range, that's his game. Hasn't a 3 point shot, since he came to Orlando after the injury in Philadelphia, and then even to a much less extent because the future is so hazy in my opinion on him. But we still do have Jonathan Isaac. Um, what are your thoughts on maybe any fears about the Magic as a unit having collective lack of shooting? I think I've seen some of those takes on Twitter and kind of want to get your response on that.
Yeah, I think the perception is real and exists mainly because of the starting backcourt, because it just feels wrong that we are starting two guards who might be the worst shooters on the team. That's the part where everyone's thrown off to me. But it makes sense when you see the rest of the roster and the lineup, where the front court actually has all the shooting you really need. I just looked up the catch and shoot numbers from last year real quick. Wendell Carter, Chuma Okiki, and Mo Wagner all shot over 33% on over 3 attempts per game. Cole Anthony, RJ Hampton, Franz Wagner, and Mo Bamba all shot between 36 and 40% on 2 to 4 attempts per game. And then Devin Kennedy and Gary Harris actually shot over 40% on high volume over 4 a game, but Devin Kennedy only played at the end there. But he's a shooter to watch out from the G League, who went through a big injury, but he can knock it down. He could enter the Magic's rotation by next year, especially when they need shooters to finish these plays. But in terms of the shooting and spacing as a team, I'm I definitely have concerns about the backcourt, but I think the front court should keep it spaced enough, especially when we have the on ball shooters as well. And more so, I think that we'll be creating offense other ways. Like Fultz isn't going to be hitting threes, but he can play make, attack the defense. He can break down the defense by penetrating the paint. He'll snake pick and rolls. He can get anywhere he wants in the mid range. So that's Fultz's way of breaking down the defense and then distributing the ball, either attacking the rim, going for the floater, drawing fouls, or kickouts. And that's just Fultz. And obviously, there should be some two-man game there with Paolo as well in terms of the pick and roll, and more so probably rolls than handoffs, because Fultz isn't as much anything of an on-ball shooter in that sense. But
Yeah.
in terms of Paolo's shooting, I don't really have too many concerns, not as many as I did like a few weeks ago when I was really listening to all these conversations about just everyone else's concerns about it. But when I looked a little
Hmm.
closer, it just seems like another average good skill of his that isn't anything crazy off the board. Like he shot 34% on 4 threes a game at Duke. That's a good percentage
That's
that
pretty solid.
on a points per possession basis, where people measure, how good of an offensive possession something is. Durant and Kawhi, the base I always use is that a Durant Kawhi 50% 2 point jumper is worth the same as a 33% three-pointer. And that's literally what Paolo hit 33.8% on threes per game at Duke. So to me, that's just like an average skill. It's a fine skill, and also room for growth. He's a 74% free throw shooter last year on 159 attempts. Again, that's just kind of average or good, where it's not jumping off the page, but it's silly to throw him in the same sentence. But LeBron James has a career 74% free throw shooter.
Oh,
It's the
wow.
exact same percentage, so it's not a concern by any means either. And
Yeah.
then, fun little fact in March Madness on the biggest stage, Paulo Banchero played 5 March Madness games and shot 4 threes a game and made 52% of them. So he was on fire on the biggest stage. That's always fun to see.
Yeah.
So there's at least a few reasons to hope in terms of the three pointer. And then, like you mentioned, the mid range is real. Like I'll have to dig deeper on the percentages, but the tape is just a tough shot hitting mid range assassin. Like he's pulling up crossovers into deep twos. He's posting you up for a fadeaway. Like he'll do anything down there. So I would assume that taking so many tough on ball shots, showing off his touch on these passes and finishes and mid range jumpers, along with all the other signs, essentially being just average or good, not bad, all of those, that sum kind of brings positive indication that as long as, like before, as long as he's willing to put in the work, like these you would expect out of a star player, he should be able to develop into being good at everything. Where suddenly, if like Franz, when you're just good at everything, you just can't be taken off the floor. You have no reason not to play. And one more point on that is the spacing at this level is just going to be wide open compared to everywhere else he's played. So you now have Paolo Banchero freight train coming down the paint. Try to stop that as you're kicking out to shooters. So hopefully Orlando gets one of these, and obviously this could be the guy where it's a grab and go north south force of nature who just creates good looks for himself at the rim, draws fouls, and makes life easier for everybody else on the team.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, dude, I'm you got me hyped now for this
You're
potential
hyped.
fit. Let's go.
Let's
No,
go. Season starts tomorrow.
I know,
Start the
right?
games. Let's get out there. I'm ready.
Playoff appearance. Let's get it. No, it's really cool, like you said. Like,
Championship by 2030.
hey,
Alex Martin
listen,
promised us.
really,
It's the prophecy. Yeah, it's a inside joke for Magic fans that we're just counting down the days from, like, I want to say from 2015 that he said that.
oh
15
wow,
years.
we'll be
It's
a
coming.
champion. I mean, listen, it might be. You see, what I love is on Twitter, they'll have like I think they did it with the Rockets, where they show a picture of like Jalen Green and Jabari Smith and like the 2025 NBA champions, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
Already
I
got
see
the
what you're
design
doing.
out.
Yeah, you
Graphic
already
designs busted out.
you're already going out that next level. But no, with the way that you described the many different ways that Paulo can fit. I like the fact that you drew comparisons, and I know the name obviously lofty comparison to LeBron, but he's another guy came in iffy shooter. You know what I mean? Really has worked on his 3 point shot to become, I'd say, a pretty reliable weapon from out there. Even as his free throws have been, more or less pedestrian. He's always been kind of if there's ever a blemish in this game, he's been just kind of about average from the free throw line. And that's a really good line. And going, hey, 34-35 from three isn't that bad when you look at a guy like Braun, who you don't let take open threes. And for most of his career, you would say that's where he hovered. So I do like kind of seeing a parallel there in terms of a high volume kind of shot maker who the three is a tool in the toolkit if it's not necessarily the hammer.
Exactly.
So I
Right.
definitely do like that. I'm curious. You went to your most recent article about the fit between Wagner and Banchero, two tall wings who can kind of initiate the offense and do all of those things we brought up earlier. Just passing, shooting, just being a basketball player, but doing it at a great level in a 6'10" plus frame. How do you think the play of, I guess, Paulo specifically, we already saw it to a lesser extent in Wagner, but how do you think the play of Paulo will help unlock, and you kind of went into this a little bit more specifically with Markel Fultz, but let's say Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs specifically unlock their play as guards, because I kind of see in my head Cole Anthony eventually in a fully realized version on this team being like a scoring kind of combo guard off the bench. I'm not sure where I see Jalen Suggs because this year was just so bad from what I was expecting to what the realization was, and rookie slumps happen. So I also can't put a whole lot of stock in that. But how do you think those two guards game will kind of flourish or adapt with the addition of Paulo there?
Oh yeah, I really love the potential fit of Cole Anthony's pull up game off of Paolo's sturdy handoffs, picks, short roll playmaking. Like, I mean, is Steph and Draymond too much to expect? No, but yeah, maybe a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you see like you picture the Steph and Draymond play where Steph gets doubled and dumps it off to Draymond on the short roll. He's now playing 4-on-3. Obviously, if Cole ever got to the point of double teams, that's fun to imagine. But Cole he was a really good pull up shooter. I want to say the numbers dropped off a little bit,
Hmm.
but he was hitting as efficient on pull up threes as Steph. That's why I made the little tongue in cheek joke there. It was just on about half the volume where Cole was taking about 3 per game, but as efficient as anyone. So when you have Cole in that pull up running off a handoff or running a pick and roll, and then you have Paolo on the handoff, short rolling, able to play make, drive, kick. I really like that potential combo. And then with Suggs, like you mentioned, it was disappointing on, I would say, on the offensive end, and I'll push back a little on the defensive end
Okay. Yeah, more than fair.
he because maybe I think part of the disappointment is where the pre-draft comps where all the stars were just getting like he was supposed. People were saying Brandon Roy out of the gates, and it's like that's a really great score. That's like the one of the best, most fun scores ever. But
Hmm.
the idea that he was going to be that good offensively out of the gates, I think, is what threw people off. And look, when you look at the 3-point numbers, they're just bad. I want to say it's 22% or something from deep, where
Yeah,
it's just bad.
not for
But
lack of trying.
to spin it, yeah, right. To spin it a positive way, he did have one half where he had 4 threes in a row. That doesn't happen too often. Where first quarter against I want to say the Thunder, he just dropped four. Or no, it might have been I think it was the Nets. He just dropped 4 threes in a row on him, and that was just out of nowhere. But one positive sign is that he missed about half the year, and in that time, he actually spent most of his injury recovery working on his finishing at the rim, and he saw a real improvement there in the numbers. I know Kobe Price wrote a nice article on that as well, where Cole just improved as a finisher with layups and reverses and all that stuff. And there was a clear improvement night and day from before and after. So the idea that he improved that so quickly in his time off is a positive sign that he's going to continue working on the 3-point jumper as well. But that is definitely a huge swing still for him because defensively, I think he's. I'm obviously biased, but I think he's one of the better guard defenders in the league. I know Jeff Weltman actually said on that podcast with Russillo, I referenced that Suggs was in the 90th percentile for all defenders for their stats. So we're not sure, the best defensive analytics aren't necessarily available to the public or anything, but
Hmm.
that's not nothing. When I made a graph on hustle stats that included deflections and contested shots and defensive field goal percentage, he was right in that range with elite guards that you'd want him to be, like Marcus Smart and Drew Holiday, right in that category. Now, obviously, these are just numbers, but he's also shown on the film the ability to move up a position. I think that's a huge part of his versatility, kind of where the Chauncey Billups comp came from, where
Mm.
he can guard really. He's so strong that he can and athletic that he can keep up with the swift guards on the perimeter while also being with the post players. Like I know he got in Kevin Love's head once last year where Kevin just dapped him up after he's like, great defense, man. I have nothing going against you right now. And that was just like he's doing that to Kevin Love. Like that is a big man down there. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I am straddling the line of concerned about the shooting, but hyped about the defense. And I'm definitely someone who believes Suggs will put in the work to keep developing. So you would hope that he at least finds a streaky 3-point shot. And obviously, the comparison I made there was Marcus Smart, where he had a similar terrible early shooting percentage, and no one thinks of him as a shooter. But he's now a streaky 3-point shooter
Yeah.
who's upped his percentage a little bit and higher volume and can at least it's no one's go-to plan, but he can now hit the open three, and that's kind of where I hope Suggs finds his role offensively. And in terms of with Paolo, that will probably come on drive and kicks, and short roll playmaking kicks where Suggs will be attacking closeouts or seeing open shots. Like that's the biggest benefit of Paolo for everyone is just cleaner open looks. Same as playing with Fultz. Like he's going to attract so much attention that there's just going to be easier opportunities for shots for everybody else, and that goes for Suggs, for RJ Hampton, for Chuma Okeke. These skilled wings who can attack closeouts and shoot, but might not necessarily be first options on this team. So I really like that fit there, and we've only really touched on Franz and Paolo, but I think that goes a lot of ways. Coming back to the word versatility, you can basically play them both. Franz isn't going to be rolling to the rim, but he can pop while Paolo's running a pick and pop, and then you can switch it. You can have Franz running the pick and roll with Paolo rolling in the short roll, or another example is a Spain pick and roll where maybe Paolo and Wendell are driving towards the lane, and then Franz flares back out for the three. And it's just a really tough action to stop when everyone can shoot and make team first decisions looking for the best shot for the team.
Definitely. Definitely. And you brought up even comparing Suggs and Marcus Smart is kind of funny. Not as a direct comp, but Marcus Smart actually holds the Celtics record for most threes made in a game. You know, and you're right, he doesn't come with the rub of being a shooter, but he had 11 threes. Yeah, exactly. He had 11 threes in a game against the Suns 2 years ago. So
yeah,
there is a precedent of, okay, maybe not being a shooter by label, but someone who, if you leave me open, I'll take him and I will make a good little clip of him, or at least a respectable enough clip to make 11 in the game.
Exactly.
I love that. But yeah, and I love what you said about opening up these different players, especially the skill sets, and incorporating the skill sets of Suggs and Anthony, as these guys are also potentially part of this team's future as well, you know, in terms of how the next great Magic team is constructed. Maybe these two are building blocks to that effect. Still early to see, you know, kind of what takes form there. But as of right now, definitely, I think you as well have them up there. Looking at, you mentioned Wendell Carter Jr., and I guess also we got to talk about just a little bit Jonathan Isaac. You did reference him already here. Are you looking at Isaac as a potential piece of the puzzle here? Are you thinking that he's someone who might be potentially available to offseason? I feel like you have such a interesting mix of a Magic team right now, where you have like the clear and established future in Wagner and Banchero, and to a lesser extent Suggs. You kind of have the current one that you have already started with the addition of Cole Anthony. You kind of have that past regime, but past transitional phase. Cole Anthony and I would even say RJ Hampton in the middle. But then you also have Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac. So you kind of have this like train of the past, the present, the future type thing, even though the future is now. So with all that being thrown out there, what do you look at Isaac and to a lesser extent Fultz being on that train, being young enough, 24, 25, but also, significant question marks for both, largely stemming from injury and maybe not being a fit on the team? I want to get your thoughts on them in terms of this team building construction here.
For sure. I think, like the other players, the front office still values both of those guys and basically bet on them first as the long, strong, skilled guys that they will build this team around. So there is that first guy, last guy here, and obviously every year there's new young prospects that need opportunity and need minutes, and you're either better than them or you're not, and that's how sports work sometimes. But I think Fultz, I guess I would say, is a little. I don't know who's safer, but I'll just say that there's a little less concern about Fultz on this team. Magic fans probably think of him as like the table setter, the point guard of the team. Like he's their guy. He's the fan favorite every time he checks in. There's the different energy on the floor, even where the players are more excited when he's out there. And as a defensive playmaker, Fultz still has just about every tool in his bag. He's obviously not the 3-point shooter from Washington, and the shot release still doesn't even look the same. It looks different on his 3-pointers than it does on every other shot he takes.
Yeah.
So there's worries there. But especially if Paolo can shoot, that lack of shooting won't hurt as much as long as Fultz is surrounded by spacing, and he's able, because his big key anyway is breaking down defenses, getting where he wants, and if he doesn't like the shot, kicking out anyway. So that's one where I like that fit as long as Paolo reaches where we think he should as an average shooter, and that Fultz's playmaking really could be a special connection with him. Now, Isaac's a totally different topic. I would say, as a player, for the last few years, I've considered him the core piece of the team, but that basically was before he got hurt, and
Yeah,
that was 2 years ago.
yeah,
I thought of him as, I think he was as destructive as a defender as anyone in the league back then, and that he has that potential still. That he wasn't relying on a ton of bounce and jumpiness and any crazy speed to get around necessarily. It was like a smart technique of how to use his length defensively. I thought, and he also got a lot stronger where he was shutting down Anthony Davis and Kristaps in matchups like that. That's where I saw him, but things change quickly, and there's now Paolo, Franz, Chuma all in the front court. And if the Magic team are more invested in any one or a couple of them, he could get lost in the shuffle. I still think defensively he should be around that same player. Offensively, he's been working on his ISO game. That's the big wild card: is can he be an off the dribble ISO threat? Can he be a tough shot hitter that we never saw? Mostly backing it up a little bit, mostly from low usage back with his days with Clifford. Like there's a reason Franz caught Isaac so quickly in points, and one of them is how skilled Franz is offensively, and the other one is Isaac never shot the ball. He was never the number one option unless Vucevic was hurt, where he had some 20-point performances. So all that's to say, I think they still value Isaac's talent probably as much as they did beforehand. Like I don't think they're in any hurry to move on from Isaac. If anything, they want him to just recover so they can see what they have in Isaac and Paolo and Franz on this roster, because that's a very versatile front court in its own right, just playing those three. So I think that they're going to keep both, and that because of these recent draft picks, I could see Isaac becoming more available quicker, along with all of the distractions that maybe that leads to him being more available quicker than Fultz. But I think they'll both be around for the at least the next season, maybe even probably even longer, just both around during this team building process. I don't think they're going to just be moved on from anytime soon.
Okay, I get that. I'm glad you put a little more of a holistic look on it all, because I was like, wow, maybe they're looking at Fultz. I like Fultz. I like Isaac as well. I think I've seen more from
Yeah.
Fultz, obviously, that I can say, okay, well, with Fultz, you have a guy, you know, run the pick and roll, shoot the mid range, defensively know what you can get. Whereas for Isaac, it's been since the bubble, so I
Yeah.
really don't have that long to go from. And even from then, I wasn't going to lie and say I've seen that much Isaac from then, because he was injured for parts of those times as well. So for me, I was like, oh, maybe they'll just move on. I like the fact that you said, okay, hold up, like they actually did like these players. You're right, they were the first to invest in these players, both of them, giving them extensions. Um, Despite other
Right.
teams maybe kind of balking at that. So that makes a lot of sense. And again, you wish for the best of health for them and kind of seeing how they fit on this team, because then you do have some additional defensive versatility there, some additional length. Obviously, shooting concerns, but again, if you look at how you described the play of Paulo and Franz kind of driving the rest of these other players, maybe you get enough shooting from other positions that it's not even a problem. Um, but before we kind of close out on the Magic and Arcane, you've been great. I really appreciate this. I want to get your thoughts on. We've kind of talked around the front office. Obviously, their fingerprints are all over this team. But I want to get your thoughts on just the front office regime during this time, as well as the coaching. Jamal Mosley, really kind of new coach in terms of, I love what he brought from an energy perspective, from a fight perspective. The Magic seem to kind of resonate and emanate, that kind of seem to come from Mosley. But I kind of get your thoughts on the leadership up top. We were talking about the players as we kind of look forward with the Orlando Magic here, especially this offseason.
Yeah. We touched a little bit on the goals of this front office for sure with Jeff Weltman and John Hammond, and they clearly really want to bet on a certain couple of skills. And first of all, it seems to be just good basketball players. As simple as that sounds, but they want all around guys who fit at any situation where there's no worries about who's going to guard who or who can't guard, who's going to get picked on here. Where there's just, to say it one more time, that two-way team first versatility, the key
Mm-hmm.
words of this team building mindset. And then with Jamal Mosley, I personally just love everything about what he's brought to this team. I mean, we haven't had an energy like that on the sidelines or on the court in years. I mean, we just don't play that, like, not to take away from the defense and the Clifford teams at all. They just
Mm-hmm.
didn't play like this, where there was never any give up. There was no plays off. It's beautiful to see the how quickly things can change for a culture when you get the right people in place. And um, a lot of people weren't sure about the hire because they didn't know a ton about him necessarily. But he's been on the sideline with Rick Carlisle forever. He worked in Denver. He's a former player himself. He worked with Jeff Weltman in Denver as well. I'm talking about Coach Mosley.
Yeah.
But he's been waiting for his turn, and it's turned out exactly how everyone would want. Where other coaches are jealous of the effort that this team gives, that he's able to communicate with the players, which is so important these days, to be able to criticize without being overly harsh or mean or anything. Where it's a clear form of communication and a co-mutual you know dedication to growth, where it's built on daily grind and daily results and just doing the work that day, and all the phrases you love to hear in your sports teams, but you really see it play out.
Yep.
Like you can say the right things, but you can tell the difference when there's effort and there's not, and these guys
Yeah.
care, and that's partly because Mosley inspires them to give their all every game. And I mean, you don't see teams tanking try as hard as they did last year. That's really where I think you can notice the effort and the coaching and the effects of that. Where like everyone knows the Magic want ping pong balls, but they're still trying in the fourth quarter down 20, and with the backups, and suddenly they got back in it, and that's just a common theme we found last year. So I think everyone has to be, obviously it's a wins business. So if the wins don't come around, things change quickly. But I love the direction that Mosley has put in this team, and really on board with the whole culture and mentality this front office has been building.
Definitely. Wow. I love the way you brought kind of out the mindset of the team being, hey, what all teams want, which is we're gonna work together, team focused mindset. Let's grind. I call it the opening video monologue, because whenever you look at like a home team's opening video, you kind of get those. We're all about that work, and you see the close ups of the yellow, and then you watch them play, and you're like, okay,
Grind.
like yeah, exactly. Like some are about it, some aren't. I remember I think it was the 2017 Cavs, and mind you, they were a really good team, but they had this like this. It was this hilarious kind of, we work hard. We're always in the gym. We've got our hard hat on. It's like you guys are like a really glitzy offensive team. You guys are one of the worst defenses ever. Like I'm not really sure what y'all talking about, but it was funny to kind of see again what the team wants to believe they are, and then when we watch the team, what they actually are. And in this case with the Magic, you're saying, hey, like what they want to be and what they say they are is kind of what we're seeing, even if the talent hasn't quite matched up to the mentality.
Exactly. I mean, the grit. They believe in it.
Yes, there
It
you
might as
go.
well be the slogan, but they follow through with it. So
There you go. I love that. I love that. And I want to say, kind of moving just from the Magic into the more general NBA draft. I know I really wanted a Magic expert on here, so I appreciate you again for giving me the time and kind of talking about that. But what other picks, selections did you like? It was a crazy draft, kind of bereft of trades I thought were going to happen. Nothing happened with John Collins. Nothing happened with Kyrie Irving. Nothing happened with Dejounte Murray. In fact, nothing happened with any of the top 10 picks in terms of trade to match all the pre-draft chatter that we thought there'd be a whole lot of craziness. But, there was a few moves between Charlotte, New York, Oklahoma City, Detroit, some surprising picks. What were your kind of general thoughts on this draft? Obviously outside the Magic, and then maybe some selections you liked or were surprised by.
yeah, I thought the Pistons were the winners of the draft to me, and maybe the Grizzlies too. But the Pistons coming away with two talents that some people would classify both in the top tier, depending how deep that top tier went, with Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, able to find Cade Cunningham, a partner in Ivy, who seems like a match made in heaven as like this north-south force who can just attack right away, especially off closeouts created by Cade. And then obviously Duren's rim rolling and play finishing off of the lob threat there just seems like a really nice match. And then you have some defensive upside and versatility between them all as well, with Duren as a possible anchor. So I really thought Detroit killed it and won that. And then the Grizzlies made a good pick at every pick. They got four good basketball players yet again: Vince Williams, Kennedy Chandler. I love the Jake LaRavia pick, who's just a 6'8", skilled another 6'8" skilled basketball player who doesn't really make too many mistakes. So just Memphis doing what everyone knows and drafting everyone's favorite uh, big board players once again. And
Always, always.
it's what they do. And I'd say another you got. I like the Christian Koloko pick for the Raptors. Mark Schindler wrote a great article on that, where Koloko's defensive anchor and versatility and shot blocking, just a huge defensive talent there that fills a need for the Raptors at center. And just a really big fan of those two teams and how they came out of it as well. Did you
Absolutely.
have any prospects that you thought like you really liked the fit with?
Oh yeah, so actually, I loved the Coloco fit was nice. I did like that in Toronto. It's gonna be nice again. Also shout out to the friend of the program, just friend Mark Schindler, like really cool guy.
The
Yeah,
best.
he is, man, for sure. But I definitely thought that was interesting from that they needed kind of a big, kind of having that length. Apparently, pre-draft the guy was shooting the lights out, so like that's intriguing. Didn't see that in Arizona per se. Definitely surprised by that. I love the fit of Jabari Smith in Houston. I just thought Jabari was more of the maybe you might be down more on like the star upside, but as a person who could fit on any team in the top three, any team in the NBA, you need length, you need defensive versatility, you need elite shooting. Like you get all of that. That's a no fail kind of guy, and I feel in Jabari Smith you have that. So in Houston, you kind of need that because your other main big for the future is Alperen Şengün, just a very skilled offensive player, but defensively the warts are there, and you have Jalen Green still trying to figure out whether Kevin Porter Jr. is part of your future. And I guess speaking on that, I loved all of the Rockets' moves. I mean, you were able to bring
Yeah.
in Jabari, able to get Tari Eason. You have
Hmm.
that Bari and Tari thing going on now. You are you able to get Ty Ty Washington. As maybe a guy who right off the bat I think will be kind of your backup guard who can initiate pace, shoot for the mid range well. Get others involved unselfishly, but also there might be an opening, for him to kind of take on a starting point guard role in the future. And I would love a Washington Green backcourt. That'd be really kind of neat there. With Tari, playing the four. Maybe you put Jabari at the three. I like him more at the five, but maybe you put him at the three. You still have Usman Garuba, as well. So you have
Yeah.
some interesting pieces all of a sudden in Houston that you can mix and match in some really cool ways. So I loved what I saw there. Um,
Oh yeah. Tari Eason, great fit
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, love
dude.
that pick. I mean, I had him in the top tier too. Just first super versatile forward and can do a lot for them on the wing
Yeah, and
in
he's
between
what
all those
six
scores you
nine.
mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah, and the size, like you said, you brought up again with it's a totally different look because neither of those guys. In fact, one of their issues for both is the lack of playmaking, the lack of I want to say they're stiff players because I think Jabari is more stiff, quote unquote, than Tari is. But you look at what you get from Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner, you do get more of that again, distributing, scoring, getting us
right.
involved. With Tari and Jabari, it's like, hey, we're just trying to point A, point B. Tari's gonna drive full court. Jabari's gonna shoot it. Like this was gonna happen.
Throw down some slams coast to coast. Why not?
Exactly, exactly. So both are different, but I like that you're getting again intriguing play styles and perspectives in different packages in terms of size. But I think my last
Absolutely.
one, Johnny Davis. I definitely like Johnny
There you
Davis.
go.
Really big
Fun one.
fan of him. Yeah, I love his. I really think that he'll be able to shoot threes more consistently with some more spacing. I don't know if Washington is the place to give you that, but
Yeah.
also, we saw his defensive attitude. Always trying to go after it. Someone who didn't really take a whole lot of plays off that on the end, even though he had basically every right to in terms of giving him a pass from a guy who's on a team that's not as great, having to manufacture a lot of that team's offense, and that results in a lot of tough middies. So I guess I just want to see how that translates on the NBA stage. Already having
Yeah.
had a massive workload.
Yeah, he's got that mid-range bucket getting. I saw he shot 38% on catch and shoot threes, so that should be a
Mm,
positive for that D and 3 role where maybe he fills something of just that basic role as he grows into the rest of his game and can obviously bring you some buckets off the bounce as well.
little
I
sauce.
also really like the Spurs picks. I just kind of realized looking back at it, like Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, and on top of Jeremy Sochan, I really like his defensive playmaking at the four there, and just a super skilled big, like a classic kind of a classic Spurs player in
Mm,
my opinion there. But that was a nice haul for them as well. So a lot of fun prospects and matchups here there where you get some nice fitting roles.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, this has been a blast, man. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you coming on and just talk. I mean, we talked all. You know, we got Magic, got Draft, got Team Construction. It's been a fun conversation, man.
We
Um,
got it all. Hit the big ones. You gotta
yes,
love
sir.
talking Magic basketball. Who doesn't?
Absolutely, man. I'm really appreciative of your time and grateful to have had you on. Where can folks find more of your work? Obviously, just you have anything coming up? We're gonna take a little break with the off season, kind of in full swing. What is the plans for RK and where can people catch more of what you do?
Yeah, I just dropped that article on Paulo Banchero and his fit with the Magic. Just going over a lot about what we just talked about here. So check that out on my Twitter and Substack Beyond the RK. Also got it on YouTube, but I'm sure we'll have something else fun in the mix coming soon. But that's my most recent work, so feel free to check it out. Thanks for the support. Thanks for having me. Love your work. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, man. Always, really do appreciate you. Thank you, man. And listen, y'all, make sure to follow him on Twitter Beyond the Arcade. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin NBA. Really appreciate you rocking with us. There is more to come this off season. We are not done, but we are done tonight. So until next time, for RK, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and I'll talk to y'all real soon. All right, y'all. This has been a Sports Ethos presentation.